Liam, Arya, and Marcus never expected a simple ride to their apartments to turn into a nightmare. What started as a late-night elevator trip became a descent into something that shouldn't exist, something that watches, whispers, and waits. Tonight on the Darkling radio, their fear becomes yours in... My name is Ryan, and I've always hated elevators. Not because I'm claustrophobic or afraid of heights, but because something about being trapped in a metal box between floors makes my skin crawl. When I was 8, I got stuck in one for 2 hours during a power outage, crying in the dark until the fire department forced the doors open. I thought I'd outgrown that fear, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. Tonight proved it. It was close to midnight when I reached my apartment building, exhausted after a long day at work. The lobby was empty and quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy. The security guard was asleep at his desk, his small TV flickering with static. I passed him, dragging my tired legs toward the elevator. The doors stood open like a gaping mouth. The interior light buzzed faintly, throwing pale shadows on the metal walls. For a second, I considered taking the stairs, but 15 floors felt impossible. I stepped inside, pressed the button for 15, and leaned against the cold wall. The doors closed with a mechanical sigh. The elevator didn't move right away. I heard the faint hum of machinery, then a low creak from somewhere above. It started ascending slowly, the numbers glowing one by one. 2, 3, 4. I felt the familiar weightless tug in my stomach, that strange floating sensation. Then it stopped at 5. The hum faded. The silence that followed was thick, unnatural. I stared at the floor indicator, waiting for it to change. It didn't. I pressed the button again, harder this time. Nothing. My thumb jabbed at the emergency button, but there was no sound, no ring, no operator voice. Just a faint click, then dead silence. A cold draft brushed my neck. I turned, expecting to see someone behind me, but I was alone. The air felt different now, stale and heavy, as if the oxygen itself was thinning. I told myself it was fine, just a mechanical glitch, but my heartbeat was already quickening. I looked up at the ceiling, at the metal vent above me. It was shaking ever so slightly, like something was pushing against it from the other side. The vibration was soft at first, almost unnoticeable, then stronger, rattling the bolts. I took a step back, eyes fixed on the vent. A faint sound followed. Breathing. Slow, steady, and human. It wasn't mine. My chest tightened, my pulse thundering in my ears. I stood frozen, listening. The sound was rhythmic, exhaling and inhaling, echoing through the tiny space. Then something scraped across the vent, a harsh metallic drag that sent shivers through me. I wanted to yell, to hit the emergency alarm again, but no sound left my throat. The lights flickered once, twice, then dimmed to a sickly yellow. The elevator suddenly jerked, as if it had been pulled upward by force. I stumbled, catching myself against the railing. The breathing stopped. Everything went still again. Too still. I stared at the vent one last time, heart pounding, and noticed something horrifying. A handprint smeared across the inside of the metal grate, as if something had pressed against it from the other side, trying to push its way through. The handprint on the vent didn't fade. It stayed there, pale and greasy, as if pressed by something that shouldn't exist. I stared at it, unable to move, my own reflection trembling in the stainless steel walls around me. The elevator was silent again, but not in the way empty places are silent. This silence felt alive, thick, watchful, breathing with me. I forced myself to take a step forward, pressing random buttons just to hear a sound, any sound, but nothing worked. The display stayed frozen at the number 5, its dull red glow flickering weakly. A soft knock echoed from above. One tap, then another. Slow, measured, as if testing. The metal vent shifted slightly. Dust fell through the small holes and drifted toward the floor. I backed up until I hit the wall. My skin crawled with the awareness that something was right above me. The air temperature dropped, enough to make me shiver. The hum of the lights dimmed, replaced by a faint static that seemed to vibrate through the walls. I tilted my head, listening carefully. It wasn't just noise. Beneath it, I could almost make out whispers. They were too low to understand, too fragmented to be words, yet they felt directed at me. The elevator jolted suddenly, hard enough to knock me off balance. I grabbed the handrail as the floor groaned beneath my feet. The light above flickered violently, throwing quick shadows across the walls. For a split second, I thought I saw movement in one of the reflections, something crouched in the corner behind me. I spun around, but nothing was there. My pulse was racing so fast it hurt. Then came the sound again, a deep, heavy thud on the ceiling. Whatever was up there was moving now, dragging itself closer to the center. I could hear the scrape of metal, the faint groan of strained bolts. I wanted to scream for help, to pound on the doors, but the idea of making noise felt wrong. It felt like noise would invite it. The next moment, the elevator began to move, not smoothly, but in jerky, uneven bursts. I clung to the rail, feeling the cables creak overhead. The display flickered, numbers changing erratically. 6, 3, 8, 2. The floor trembled violently, as if the whole shaft were shaking. And then it stopped. Hard. My knees buckled as the elevator came to a sudden halt. The lights dimmed to almost nothing, leaving only the faint glow from the display, showing no number at all. The air was damp and cold now, and the metallic smell was stronger, mixed with something else, something like rot. Slowly, the doors began to slide open with a screeching sound that made my teeth ache. Instead of a familiar hallway or the lobby, I saw a corridor stretching out into complete darkness. The walls looked wrong, unfinished, concrete, dripping moisture. No carpet, no lights, no sound except a slow drip of water somewhere in the distance. I turned back toward the elevator panel, wanting to shut the doors again, but my fingers froze when I noticed it. The handprint on the vent was gone. Something had crawled out. The hallway stretched ahead, dark and endless, with the faint smell of rust and damp concrete. I didn't want to leave the elevator, but standing inside that flickering box felt even worse. The air there had turned thick, almost suffocating, as if it didn't belong to this world anymore. I stepped out cautiously, my shoes crunching on grit and broken glass. The elevator doors closed behind me with a hollow metallic thud, and when I turned around, they were gone. No seams, no outline, just a solid wall of concrete where the doors should have been. I ran my hands over the surface, desperate to find some hidden latch or button, but there was nothing. It was as if the elevator had never been there at all. My phone's flashlight became my only source of light, its weak beam slicing through the darkness. The walls were uneven, streaked with stains that looked like old water damage, or maybe something worse. The deeper I went, the colder it became. My breath fogged in front of me, and every step echoed too loudly, like the sound was bouncing off walls that weren't quite real. After a few minutes, I started to hear it again, that breathing. Slow and uneven. It wasn't behind me this time. It was all around me, faint and shifting, sometimes ahead, sometimes behind, always close. I spun the light in every direction, but nothing moved. The hallway seemed to go on forever. Then, out of nowhere, I noticed a door on the right, a small metal one, its paint peeling, hanging half open on rusted hinges. The word control was faded across it in flaking white letters. My throat felt tight as I reached for it, pushing it open with my sleeve. Inside was a cramped room filled with old monitors and machinery humming faintly. The smell of burnt wires filled the air. I stepped inside. Most of the screens showed static, but one caught my eye. It showed the inside of the elevator I had just left. It was empty, but the camera feed was wrong. The lighting inside the elevator looked darker, redder, as if the emergency lights were on. I stared, transfixed until movement caught my attention. Something shifted in the corner of the frame. A figure was standing there now, facing the wall, its body stiff and motionless. I squinted, trying to make out the details. The clothes looked familiar. A gray hoodie, black jeans, just like mine. The figure slowly turned its head toward the camera. My breath hitched when I saw its face. It was me. My skin looked pale and lifeless, and my eyes were completely black, like pools of ink. My mouth hung open slightly, moving soundlessly. I leaned closer to the monitor, trying to understand what I was seeing, and that's when the screen flickered. The figure moved closer to the camera, its expression twisting into something hateful. Then, the power cut out. The room went pitch black. I couldn't see anything, but I heard the faint static of the monitors fade into a whisper that sounded exactly like my own voice, breathing right next to my ear. The whisper in the darkness froze me where I stood. It was my own voice, soft, trembling, but unmistakably mine, breathing words I couldn't quite understand. Every instinct screamed to move, to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. I stood there in the pitch-black control room, my flashlight somewhere on the floor, my phone dead. The only sound was my heartbeat and that low murmur circling me like it was alive. When I finally forced my body to move, my hand brushed against cold metal. The wall was trembling beneath my palm, vibrating with a faint hum that grew louder by the second. A loud clank echoed from behind me, followed by a dragging sound, like something heavy scraping across concrete. I turned, trying to see through the dark, but my eyes could barely make out shapes. Then, in the blackness ahead, a faint red glow appeared. It pulsed weakly, almost like a heartbeat. I stumbled toward it, desperate for any kind of light. The glow led me to a metal panel on the wall that began to creak and twist as if something inside was forcing it open. I stepped back as it split apart, revealing a set of elevator doors behind it. They were old, rusted, the kind you'd find in a maintenance shaft, not a residential building. The doors slid open with a screech that made my teeth ache. Beyond them was the familiar box, the same elevator I'd stepped into hours ago, or maybe only minutes. The floor was slick with something dark and wet. The walls had deep scratches etched into them, like someone, or something, had been trapped inside, clawing to escape. I wanted to turn away, to run down that endless hallway instead, but the longer I stared, the more I realized something else was inside. There was a figure standing at the back of the elevator, motionless in the flickering light. Its head was tilted down and I couldn't see its face, but the clothes. It was wearing the same thing I was. My hoodie, my jeans, even the tear on my sleeve. The figure raised its head slowly, almost mechanically, and I felt my stomach twist when I saw the face. It was me again, only wrong, paler, thinner. My eyes empty and black like holes. My double smiled at me with cracked lips and began to step forward, one slow movement at a time. I stumbled backward, but the control room behind me was gone. There was nowhere to go but into the elevator. The doors began to close inch by inch, and panic took over. I jumped inside just before they shut completely, heart slamming against my ribs. The figure was gone. I was alone again. But the air felt strange, too cold, too heavy. The walls seemed closer than before, and the mirrored metal reflected not one version of me, but two. The buttons on the panel were all gone now except for one, glowing faintly in red. B7. My finger trembled as I reached for it, but I didn't press it. The elevator moved on its own, descending fast. The lights flickered wildly, and in every reflection, I saw my face change. Older, bloodless, lifeless. By the time the elevator finally stopped, I wasn't sure which reflection was still mine. The elevator stopped with a sudden jolt, throwing me against the wall. The light flickered violently, then dimmed to a weak, pulsing glow that made everything look unreal. My reflection in the polished metal seemed wrong. It moved slightly out of sync with me, tilting its head when I didn't, smiling when I frowned. I pressed my palm to the wall, hoping to ground myself, but it was like touching someone else's skin, cold, clammy, alien. The doors slid open, and I froze. The space beyond was vast and cavernous, stretching far into darkness. Hundreds of elevators lined the walls, all identical to mine. Their doors opened and closed in unison, creaking and clanging like some giant mechanical heartbeat. Shadows moved inside each car, pacing, swaying, their movements jerky and unnatural. Some leaned against the doors as if waiting, watching. None had faces I could see clearly, except for the one that stood directly opposite. A figure stepped out of that elevator. I recognized it immediately. It was me. Older, thinner, pale, eyes hollow and black. Its movements were slow, deliberate enough to seem inhuman. It raised a hand pointing directly at me. I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. A low, mechanical hum filled the space, growing louder and more chaotic. The other elevators around us began to open their doors in unison. Inside each car, I saw more versions of myself, smiling, whispering, staring with empty eyes that glimmered in the dim light. I wanted to run, but the floor beneath me cracked, spreading like a spiderweb of darkness. I stumbled backward and fell through a gap that hadn't been there before. I was falling fast, tumbling into the open elevator shaft. The walls blurred past me, the lights stretching into long, red streaks. I hit the floor hard, groaning, and the doors slammed shut above me. The elevator began to rise, slowly at first, then faster, jerking violently as it climbed. I sat in the corner, my body shaking uncontrollably. My reflection in the metal walls rippled again, and for the first time it spoke. Not with words, just a sound, a faint whisper repeating my name over and over like a chant. I tried to cover my ears, but it was everywhere, inside my head, outside, impossible to escape. The air grew colder. My breath fogged in front of me, and shadows shifted unnaturally across the walls. I could see multiple versions of my reflection flickering in the metal, not just one or two. Some were smiling, others screaming silently, some staring blankly, all moving independently, all alive in their own terrible way. When the elevator finally slowed, the floor indicator flickered. 15. I should have felt relief, but I didn't. The doors slid open to an empty hallway, identical to the one I'd left hours ago or maybe minutes. But I wasn't alone. In the distance, a faint silhouette appeared, standing perfectly still. It was me, or something that had taken my shape. I wanted to run, to escape, but I couldn't. The whispering began again, louder, overlapping, surrounding me. The shadow didn't move, but the air felt heavier with each passing second, as if it were drawing me closer. I realized then with a sickening certainty that no matter which version stepped out next, I would never be the same. The doors closed behind me, and the hallway plunged into darkness. The only sound left was my heartbeat, and the faint echo of my own voice, calling from somewhere deep inside the building, whispering, "Welcome back." And I understood. I wasn't alone. I had never been alone.